and I'm going to actually put myself on the screen like a professional would. Great to have you with us again today. Actually, let me put this up on the screen too, just to remind you, if you're here with us watching live, you can go ahead and drop us a comment to let us know you're here, or if you have any questions all throughout the show, whatever. And if you're watching after the fact, hey, you know what? Feel free to leave us a comment anyway. And I check those about once a week or so, and sometimes more frequently if I actually get the notifications, and I'll reply back to those as I can. And it's all about having fun around here. So speaking of fun, let's bring in on our own Jeff Pitch to have fun with us yet again. What's up?
I'm fun. Tell my kids that, please.
Are they still in the room with you? I could.
No. I told him, I said, hey, you could be on. You can just say hi and something. And he was all excited, and then he got nervous and left. It's like, it's not that big of a deal, kid. Come on. I let him stay home today. I was being a good dad, I guess. Enjoy a day off.
Yeah. Is it a day off, or is it just like home not homeschooling, like the remote learning?
No, it's the elementary. I mean, he's going in school. He's in elementary 5th grade. But
oof.
Yeah. I just decided to give him a day off.
Hey, I like days off.
Yeah. Why not?
So it's all good.
Okay, sorry. I'm very verklempt.
I'll give you a reprieve. Discuss amongst yourselves.
Yes. And speaking now that we've got the jokes going, we got to bring on the guest.
Indeed. So, our friend Guy Leech has been working with products from Citrix, Microsoft, and a lot of others for well over 25 years. We don't do young people in this program, apparently. We only have the oldest and the most well-aged, like fine wine. But during that time, Guy's worked with various software vendors, Citrix partners, and startups, and most recently himself. So having been a professional software developer, he specializes in using this thing called PowerShell. I don't know. Not just for automation in EUC, but also for troubleshooting, producing scripts that he shares with people like me to actually sound like they're doing their job well. And he's a common presenter on CGC and similar events. Current Microsoft MVP, VMware vExpert, Citrix CTP, and I don't know, we could probably get some more alphabet salad out of this if we really try, but let's go ahead and just bring on Guy Leech. Good morning. Should we say Sir Guy? I don't, that's probably not proper.
I've not got the knighthood yet, and my morning was quite a long time ago. My camera's slightly.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, I don't know.
I've never been introduced as a joke before as well. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I like being the first and everything I possibly can.
You forgot comedy genius. I mean, what's on Twitter, what he says on Face, I mean, is just comedy gold as far as I'm concerned.
Steady on. Although, making IT dad jokes is quite an art, as I found. It's a little bit flat, but hey, not everything works first time, as we know in this IT industry. And I've always got my fallback book if I need it. I try and read this at least a couple of times a day to get a bit of new material.
Stay up on the dad jokes. It's important.
Absolutely, comedy gets us through a lot of things. Comedy.
For those of you after the fact that can't see our screen, you really do need to go actually watch the YouTube video of this because it's going to be important
for you guys. Yeah, now that I seem to have got the CTP with the best hair award as well to add to the alphabet soup.
Yeah, exactly. If it's not an award, I'm going to make it. So
my wife very kindly said I look stupid, so I thought, this hair will do.
So Trent said, came for the hair, stayed for the tech. I absolutely agree. Yeah.
Good old Trent. Can you tell us about this niche little product called PowerShell? I believe it was released Power something. It's a Novell product, right? It's
still going. Yeah. Well,
So, and
you said in intro though, so my background is actually as a software developer. So I wrote my first ever code back in 1980 when you guys were how old?
say 1980.
1980.
Would have
All
been
right,
9.
so I would have been 39.
You were 39 in 1980. You're
39.
well,
No.
you're 80-year-old. Wow.
No, I would have been about 6. So young chicken by comparison, I guess.
Yeah, my late father was a COBOL programmer, so he used to bring Commodore PETs back from his office, so we could play the games that he'd bring back. We could load from tape, and I looked at the games and thought, yeah, I can do this. Modified the code a bit, and then started writing my own. And that's how I reckon anybody should get into coding. You know, look at other people's code, understand it, start to modify it, write your own.
Quite literally, that's how I got started with a lot of things in that regards as well. It's also how I found out that I like other people doing it and not having me do it.
That's exactly how my brother started back. Yeah, I mean, he's 3 years younger than I, but it's the exact same thing. He started, we were playing games and he wanted to basically kind of start creating his own. And now he's doing development and whatnot for a company over in the Chicagoland area, VP or some crazy thing.
Nice.
Younger kids, younger brothers. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't miss hand assembling 6502 assembler and trying to work out hex jumps in my head. That was, yeah, interesting. Although I can still remember some of the op codes from that, and that's getting on for 40 years ago. But I can't remember why I've walked into a room these days.
Well,
yeah,
that
one.
Yeah, that's always another problem that's definitely, I think all of us
whenever I
here.
walk into the room and I have this look on my face, she just goes, "You forgot why you came in here?" I'm like, "Yeah, once again."
Yeah, not just me then. That's good.
That's why I write things down now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Calendar
Sometimes
reminders.
it's just spur of the moment. Like I'll get all excited. Oh, I got to look up this product on a web page or something, and then I'll get in front of my computer and I'm like, "What was it again?"
Yeah.
I know I was excited about it.
I'm literally going to, let you guys talk while I write a note for myself to actually buy more toner, because.
You mean you haven't got a printer that orders it itself? How backward are you?
No, mine's like 15 years old. It's all good.
Yeah, I think my printer, I've got a brother printer and it's just soldiered on for years and years. Not that I print much these days.
Yeah, I had a brother MFC. I actually just it's 10, probably a good 10 years easy, if not longer. Gave it to my brother-in-law the other day because I didn't need that big thing sitting in my office. Those are rock solid.
Well, as long as you'd only print things like once a month or whatever,
Yeah.
Absolutely. So anyway, let's
sorry, go on.
Let's jump in here. So, Guy, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and even where you're from, because I don't know if everybody knows that. So let's just jump in.
Yeah, I was born in a city in the UK called Birmingham, not to be confused with Birmingham, Alabama. Well, I was going to say grew up there, but I haven't actually grown up yet, as people who read my dad jokes will realise. But I was brought up there, shall we say. Went to University of Manchester in 1985 to read computer science. So I came away with there in 1988 with a computer science degree, although that degree was half hardware and half software, and I just couldn't get to grips with the hardware at all. It's like, this is just too hard. So they would generally do labs in the afternoon. So I partnered with somebody who was good at that, and I'd just go to the pub, which was quite handy because it was about 100 yards from the department. We also learned Pascal as well, which has been, I've used that. Let me think, how many times have I used that since I graduated? None. That's it. None. I did do a bit of C in my final year project, and that's what I went into after that. So after I graduated, I joined British Telecom, who were the sort of majority telecom provider in the UK at the time, recently privatised, and they actually made their own Unix servers. So this is well before Linux. So they licensed the Unix System 5 source code, had their own Motorola 68,000 based machines, and I wrote device drivers for those, for SCSI and SD disk drives, the BIOS software, and that sort of stuff. So that gave me sort of introduction to C, C++, even a bit of assembler. So I did that for a couple of years, then moved to writing more sort of C++ applications, again on Unix. SCO Unix, which is actually running on PC, but at this time I hadn't actually ever used a PC with any of that Microsoft stuff on it. That comes later in my career. So a few job changes around that area, high speeds, optical scanning and printing, stuff like that, drivers for hardware cards. So that's my background is sort of software development. Then moved to a company who was selling not device drivers so much as software development tools so people could write those sorts of things. And that was on Unix workstations, but these guys suddenly started to want to run Windows productivity software on these Unix workstations. So we started off with a product called Soft Windows, if anybody remembers that, from a company called Insignia. And I'll come back to Insignia shortly, which was an emulation of Windows, which ran like a dog nailed to the floor with all its legs removed, unless you had a Cray supercomputer to run it on. So we needed something else. So Insignia OEM'd a product called Citrix WinFrame, putting the X11 display protocol that Unix uses on top of that. So you could have these Intrigue servers, which were Windows boxes, and remote their display onto these Unix workstations. So these Unix developers could run Windows tools and those sorts of things. And we got quite good at selling that and supporting it and consulting on it. Then Citrix came along and actually bought Insignia Solutions, bought them for their Java client, actually, at the time.
Right. Yeah.
This was back in sort of 97-ish, I think, if memory serves, which it probably doesn't.
Right.
Yeah, who am I again? So that was interesting times when I came in with NT351. When I first started with it, I didn't know what a domain was. You had 35 floppies to install. Damn thing. Our first demo Citrix, Intrigue server, which was the OEM version, had 20 meg of RAM, which was a lot at the time, but we could run one session off 20 meg of RAM. My first ever laptop that I had was a Unix laptop before that even, because we were demonstrating these software development and authoring tools like Adobe FrameMaker before, actually from Frame Technology before Adobe even bought it, before they ported it to Windows to Unix people. And then sort of came more across to Windows. But then when Linux came around, it's like, I kind of know this Linux stuff, having been in the Unix world. It's just, you put forward slashes instead of backslashes. The rest is pretty much the same. Particularly in PowerShell, where we can have aliases for all the Unix commands like ls and ps and stuff like that. It's all kind of handy. Right. So that was me in the 90s, Citrix consultant, putting lots of Citrix solutions in for customers, where a big server was 4 processors and 4 gig of RAM. And those cost a colossal amount of money. Back then, 4 gig of RAM would cost something like 10,000 UK pounds, whereas 4 gig of RAM probably costs 10 or 20 UK pounds now. So, order 1,000 times difference, 100 times difference.
Yeah.
But then with one particular customer at a bank in 1998, and it's actually a pinned tweet about this on my Twitter profile. We came across a guy having put a Citrix solution in for a bank that was deciding to run various executables he had on his Novell home drive. Yeah, there's the Novell mention again on our Citrix servers, which didn't really help when you hadn't got much CPU and memory. So he thinks it's funny to write something which moves a dog across the screen or something like that, or play a game, where all the other users are there thinking, why is my Word document not scrolling properly? And you look and there's no CPU available, or the memory is being used. Of course, we've got very slow disks. So as soon as you start paging to disk back then, it's like, oh yeah, this is slow. So I thought, right, I'm going to write something with my software developer background to stop this guy running this stuff. And a product called eStopper from eSoft was born, because that was the company I was working for at the time, who eventually turned into Vicestorm, then became acquired by HP. But that product then eventually became a product in its own right, which a company called AppSense was set up to sell. So AppSense had one product called AppSense, which was a security product, which allowed you to stop people running software that you didn't want them to run. And again, using this idea I came up with called trusted ownership. So rather than having to whitelist and blacklist stuff, if I'm allowed to say those terms anymore, I'm not sure what the equivalents are, but to block stuff and to allow stuff, you don't have to do any of that. You just say, well, if it's not owned by a trusted owner, as in system, that sort of person, then I'm just going to block it out of the box, default config. Although the problem was the developer I'd handed over to, because I wrote the first couple of versions of that, wasn't really a Windows person, because of course I was an expert by then, having worked in it for almost 3 years. So he'd ring me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, because that was kind of when developers do their best work, and say, Guy, about these domain things and SIDS and so on. And it's like, Ivan, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, but I wanted to get it done. Okay, right, fine, yes, okay. And kind of the rest is history, as they say. It's AppSense then went on to have other products, Environment Manager, which I had a bit of a hand in, Performance Manager, which I didn't. Then obviously got bought by Ivanti. I'd left by then, went on to another Citrix partner. And then in 2018, having ended up working for a very large company, because in my early days, like I say, I worked for BT, huge company. The managing director doesn't know you, comes around once a year, says, thanks for what you've done. Oh, what have you done, by the way? I didn't really like it.
Oh, yes. Okay.
I didn't really like big companies, I decided. So after that, I went for small companies. The biggest one up until recently was AppSense, because they ballooned from basically one person to about 400 at their height. Then I went for a small Citrix partner in the UK, which was great, 50 people, knew everybody, fine. But then they got bought by a large outsourcer with hundreds of thousands of employees, and you just became a faceless cog again. It's like, right, I'm getting out of here.
Yeah.
So 2018, I went self-employed, and I haven't looked back, because I'm having a lovely time with lots of variety, doing PowerShell development. Again, I was actually quite late to PowerShell. I didn't start it till about 2014, and it's been it's a teenager now. It's been around for a long time, so I've still kicked myself for not having started with it many years before that. But hey, can't undo that until I've got my time machine finished. So the PowerShell stuff is good now. Doing it for people like ControlUp, Flexible IT, Avanite, those kind of people. It's nice to be sort of get up in the morning and think, oh, what shall I do today? Because I don't have massive time scales and saying, right, you must do this today, you must do this in the next hour, and do bits of Citrix troubleshooting for customers to keep my hand in there, bits of the old AppSense Ivanti stuff, because there's still people out there who do it, and there aren't, or who use it, and aren't that many of us who know the products that well anymore. A few companies now want me to write blogs for money for them, which is again quite handy. So I just have a huge amount of variety, which is brilliant. I've actually turned down a few full-time job offers simply because I just love the variety. And that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I like that. I think honestly, just recognizing over the years or whatever it takes that, you know what, there's certain just ways that I like working, and if I have the right belief that I can do that, then it's amazing what unlocks after that. And so here you are 2 years later, and still perfectly happy with it. And it turns out, oh yeah, it does work.
I say still, I'm perfectly happy with it now. When I went self-employed, was more out of necessity than anything else, because I handed in my notice at my
very common
previous
story,
employer, and they said, well, yeah, you can stay on if you don't find a job, but it was just so bad I didn't want to stay on. So I got to a point of leaving, and it's, well, I haven't actually got a permanent role to walk into. what do I do? But then an old friend of mine, again, this is where sort of community comes in. An old friend of mine from AppSense reached out and said, well, I've got a few bits of AppSense work for customers. Why don't you start there and help me do that? And then I started to do more community stuff, posting out scripts and getting a name for myself there. More people started reaching out. So you do definitely need to have belief in yourself, but just because you've got belief in yourself doesn't mean it's going to definitely fall in your lap.
Absolutely.
You've got to do it, a certain amount of work and be realistic. Because at the end of my first year, I'm not a millionaire. What's going on? I failed. It's like, yeah, there's more to life. And certainly one of the things I've learned over my 53 years is that the most important thing by far is happiness. Yeah. Money, it'd be nice to have some money and not struggle, whatever else, but happiness is the most important thing, as long as it's not happiness at other people's expense. So am I happy now? Yeah. Got a better work-life balance. My wife might not agree with that. Sometimes I do work to silly o'clock, and with the COVID lockdown, I was quite often working 7 days a week because I hadn't got anything better to do. But again, relaxation, what do? I write PowerShell scripts. Why? Well, kind of think of it like an artist. Somebody painting a picture. You start with a blank canvas, and the difficult thing is not necessarily writing the code or drawing or painting. It's what am I actually going to paint? And that's the fun thing, really, is having that idea and having well, not say unique idea, but perhaps a different take on something or a new idea rather than, oh, I'm going to write a spreadsheet program, because there aren't enough of those in the world, are there?
Right.
Actually, looking at some of the notes I made, over the years, I've prototyped, as in got working various sort of proof of concepts of things. So I did a session recording piece of software to record probably metaframe sessions back in the early 2000s, but my employer didn't want to follow through with it. So I had a working prototype.
Oh.
Some of the large banks in the UK were interested, but the employer at the time said, no, we're not going to develop it, which is a shame. And guess what came around later? I had SMS authentication. So, you try and sign into a Citrix box and it would send you a one-time text message, SMS code. That was about 2004. Similar sort of time, I had a sort of secure client. So using Citrix or RDP virtual channels, it would check your client to make sure you were legal, decent, honest and truthful, and everything was in place, right, AV, etc., before allowing you to connect. For my kids, which they loved me for, I wrote some screen capture software. So it would just take a screen capture of the screen, upload it to a share once every X seconds, although with a random back off in case they were timing it. So I could keep an eye on what they were doing without actually watching them. Again, I had a working prototype of that. Had a DHCP add-on I added on for Microsoft DHCP. Obviously, I've had my home lab for many years, so I've got Microsoft DHCP running there. So if they turn their Xboxes on at 8 o'clock, it looks up what their bedtime is. Oh, your bedtime's 10 o'clock. Right, I'm going to give you a DHCP lease for 2 hours rather than the usual 12 or 24. And you won't be able to get a lease until 7 o'clock the next morning. But it had holidays and things like that built in. Yeah, working prototype. Have I taken any of these to market? No. It's funny, you were saying about printing at the start. I was about to jump in then and talk about my Print Miser program. So again, sort of using printer hooks to look at print jobs hitting the printer and seeing how dense the prints were. So it's like, oh, this is more than 70% density because it's probably my daughter printing a picture of Justin Bieber again, or my son. Doesn't matter. We can ignore the people. I'm not going to allow it. But they're printing their homework, which is just text, and the print density is about 10%. I'll let that through. Again, I've got a working prototype of that. But all of these things I've never taken to market because I've never had. Certainly in the early days, it wasn't the internet to find the backers and the network of connections to talk to people to get sponsors and so on. And then more recently, it's just a case of time. Do I take time away from my work unpaid to try and push some of these, or do I just think, well, they're there, I proved I can do it, they were kind of useful for me, but I'm not going to get rich out of them. And as I get older and older, it's like, am I that bothered about getting rich? No, I'm comfortable. that could change in an instant. We've been lucky in this COVID crisis, fortunately.
Yep.
But again, being old, so that I don't have to homeschool my kids, and they can do chores for me. The inverse dad's taxi. I don't know if you did, the dad's taxi is a global thing, but actually taking your kids here, there, and everywhere. Do it the other way around now, which is nice. But yeah, it's having those ideas. So sitting down, so writing the code is the easy bit. As I say to people, the hardest things are having the idea in the first place.
Yes.
Then deciding what to call the product and what icons to use. And you're talking to the man who came up with the name eStopper. It's like, yeah, you need some marketing magic on that, I think.
But I mean, that's why we work in teams and that sort of thing. But honestly, as far as, all these various genius non-marketed kind of things, I think I speak for everyone when I say, what? Like, I understand, like, the okay, well, it's not enough, and getting kind of, oh, I'll just do this, this sort of thing. But what I'm fascinated about this is we talk about mindset here a lot, of just, there's a certain willingness to do things, or something like that. And I think what's unique about everything I'm hearing about what you're saying is that it's all solutions to problems. They may not be big problems, they may not, be something that's really huge, but it's something where there are actual problems involved, or there's a solution. So I'm curious, like, if you were to nail down how it is that you got into that space of saying, this is a solution that I could either wait for someone else to solve, or I could just do it myself, or, or whatever that looks like. What do you think it was that got you to that place?
Yeah, interesting question. I think a lot of that is probably my developer background, so it helps me sort of get inside the mind of the person who created the problem that I'm trying to solve. The problem is usually with applications or operating systems, trying to sort of second guess what they've done, and either put something in place to fix that or work around it, or just how can I automate, make it easier? Because ultimately, I love PowerShell because I'm lazy. I put this on Twitter earlier today. Yeah, it means I don't have to do stuff manually. So a lot of the troubleshooting I do now, a lot of the health checks I do for customers, for Citrix or Avanti, it's all done via scripts. They don't quite produce the documentation yet, so that's the chore I still have to do. But it's figuring out you can collect all this information, spot the problem, potentially put a workaround in. So, this event happens this many times on this server, which I had for a customer, means the print spool has gone south, but it can't be restarted. So what I've got to do is to get the users off there. So, the script runs, I think, once every half an hour. If it sees the problem, it puts that server into maintenance mode. Next time it comes round, if there's no users on it, it reboots it, takes it out of maintenance mode. It's like, well, that just saves people from doing manual stuff, because it's just tedious doing manual stuff, and of course there's room for error.
Yeah,
so that's the big thing with automation. Is we had this discussion actually in the US WVD group just for actually the last two meetings. Basically, is what do I get out of it? And we were talking about the ARM templates and how you can take those and have like a default and then modify them. And somebody was at some kind of point saying that as a consultant this doesn't really affect me. And it's we were kind of arguing the opposite, where as a consultant you want to deliver something to your client that you don't want them to have to call you back on, right? I mean, that's my goal as a consultant. Is I've done my job if you're not calling me with a problem. And with my experience, if you don't give them either great documentation, which they will never follow, or you hand them some automation and you have it documented from there, like you change this and this, if you want to make whatever. So it's a lot easier to hand off something that is essentially automated and dummy proof for, but you're right. It all comes down to we're human. I could do the same thing a million times. I will make mistakes on most of it because, whether it's just so used to hitting next, but on this one, I have to hit change to do that. And then I forgot. And now you got to go back and redo everything. It's just, yeah. I think, I think it is still today, even with PowerShell and other tools, that there's a lot of admins, a lot of people that just don't take advantage of the automation.
Absolutely. I mean, I come across people who boast, "Oh, I can't script," and think that's clever. But maybe going back 10 years ago, it wasn't that much of a barrier. But now that a lot of products are becoming PowerShell centric, and the beauty of PowerShell, as I say in some of my talks, is that it's the same stuff. Once you've mastered one thing, you can then use those same techniques. Once you've got the hang of objects and loops and stuff like that, then you can just reuse it. Different set of commandlets, but same old, as they say. Yeah. So there might be a steep learning curve to start with, but once you're over that, and that's the challenge really. So I'd say to people, sit in a PowerShell prompt all day rather than a CMD prompt, and don't ever call it a DOS prompt unless you actually are on DOS, which I suspect you're probably not. And just get used to using it and objects and things like that. And a lot of the admin I do manually for Citrix servers, looking at sessions, checking health, that sort of stuff, I'll just do on the command line because it's so much easier than using Studio or going to other tools or PVS and that sort of side of things. But then you've got to be pragmatic as well. You look at a problem and think, oh yeah, I could write a really nice script for that. It's going to take 2 days, and I can actually do this whole thing manually in an hour, and I'm going to do it once every 2 years. Is it really worth writing a script? Now, for a customer, I'd probably say, no, I'm not going to do that because of what it would cost them. But that's the sort of thing I might then write myself just out of pure interest and because I've got nothing better to do in the evenings and weekends. And then put it on my GitHub, where I've got close to 100 scripts now, which are ones which are really come out of, I've got a problem, I need to solve it, or I need to find what the problem is, or I just need to present this data better than I can in XYZ console. I'm going to do it myself. Most of these haven't been developed on customer time. I developed on my own time because I just want to be able to get them to work. And if it helps me, then and it helps other people, that's great. And that's kind of where the those industry awards come from, because since I got the triumvirate, which there's only I think 5 of us last time I counted in the world who got the vExpert, CTP, and vExpert. It doesn't mean you have members of the opposite sex, all the same sex, throwing themselves at you. It doesn't bring you any fame or any additional revenue, but it just gives you publicity. And it's just being able to say that you guys been there. It's just basically saying yes, the vendors agreeing that you do actually know what you're talking about, rather than it being some random blog post that we've all seen when trying to research your problem, where you think this person doesn't know what they're talking about. That's not going to work. That's rubbish. So it's getting that authentication from the vendors. But again, you don't go out deliberately for that. So if anybody goes out, right, I want to definitely get those, that's the wrong mindset. It's a case of I want to help the community. So I do it by lots of presenting and trying to share my knowledge, trying to get people over the barriers of PowerShell, or dare I mention regular expressions, without people running off screaming. Again, that's one of my goals in life, is to make people at peace with regex, because actually it's very easy.
I have not mastered that. No.
Well, I'm working on that. I'm trying to put some training courses together, but COVID's kind of kiboshed that a little bit. Although to scale them, I probably need to do them remote anyway. So I'm trying to work on that, because again, in PowerShell, using regular expressions is a great way of splitting up files, parsing stuff. I do a lot of stuff when I do for ControlUp, of looking at log files, trying to pull out the important bits. Again, we can all use regular expressions there, and they don't have to be fiendish. it's like people in the C++ community. Every year they have a obfuscated code competition. Who can write the code which is the hardest to understand? But what's the point? As a people writing PowerShell, make it easy to understand. Meaningful variable names, parameter names. And again, when you get to my age, it helps me if I've written a script. As I look at this, who wrote it? Oh, I did 6 months ago. Why can't I remember what I did and what it does? Yeah. Oh, look, I put some comments in. And that's one of the differences now. I looked at some code I'd written in my early professional days back in the later 80s. And I used single letter variable names, so they weren't meaningful. I had no comments in there whatsoever. So, the maintainability of that code was shocking. I wouldn't want anybody to inherit that. And certainly as you learn to work in a team as well, it makes a big difference to how you write your code. So, long, meaningful identifiers. What do you mean you've called this variable? This is what I want the value to be. You're not going to type that in, but now all these modern development environments, you can tab complete it to hit the first couple of letters. That's luxury. When I started my professional career writing these Unix device drivers, I was using a VT220 like green screen, 80 columns by 25 lines, connected via serial ports to a Unix server, which I'd probably written the device drivers for, using good old VI, the Unix editor, which if you want perverse commands, that's got a heck of a lot of them. And guess what? I can still remember way too many of those and not why I've walked into any particular room or the wife's birthday.
I think for script, I mean, because, PowerShell, I was doing, somebody had posted something about scripting languages or something. I threw out VB script out there, and I was doing command line stuff because we were all doing login scripts with that and stuff like that. VB script came along before we found out exactly how insecure it really was and what Microsoft had done. That was I would say my first true scripting experience was using VB script. And at the time, I'd say I was pretty darn good at it because it wasn't just login scripts. I was doing stuff all over the place for companies, for the company I was working for. But I think the thing is that when you have somebody coming up that wants to learn PowerShell or whatever, it is hard from an administrative perspective to what am I trying to say? To jump into that, because you look at it as coding. I'm not a coder. I think the big thing for me was simply that you find something kind of like what you're saying, Guy, is you find something that you want to automate or pull logs or whatever. Maybe it's not what you're going to be doing working on during the day, but maybe it's an after hours thing to help you learn to get into it. I mean, right now, I will admit I am kind of weak on PowerShell. It kind of fluctuates depending on what I'm doing and what I have to do. It's not my full-time thing, but there's so much more resources out there than ever for learning these things, and I just think a lot of people need to take that time and do it and figure it all out, because it is a huge time saver and to free you up to do other cool things. So
I say it's a great tool for us lazy people who don't want to do all this manual stuff. I said right at the start, get existing code from people from my GitHub repository or other people, but you've got to make sure you're starting with good code, because what you don't want to start is with bad practices. And that's all that's good and bad about PowerShell. The good thing about PowerShell is it's easily accessible. It's there, it's built in since Windows 7, so anybody can do it. The bad thing is it's easily accessible and anybody can do it, which means there are some god awful scripts out there. And to be honest, from corporations who should know better, really. whereas with things like C++, you don't get casual C++ developers because you don't get C++ tools just happening to lie around on the platform.
Yeah,
C#,
very true.
You can kind of do C# just without Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. But again, it's not something people do. Whereas they quite easily take up PowerShell. And with your VBS example, VBS was purely a scripting language. Whereas what I point out to people, PowerShell is a scripting language and a shell. Coming from the Unix world, it takes a lot of ideas. And the inventors of PowerShell make no bones that they took a lot of the ideas from the Unix shell, so we can use it interactively to troubleshoot as well as write scripts. Cause it's kind of the best of both worlds. I'm not saying you need to be a professional developer to write the code, but make sure if you are learning it that you look for good resources to start with. Having a book that teaches you. Most of the books out there I've seen are pretty good. There's a lot of courses out there, but there ain't no substitute for doing it yourself. Like I say, take a script from a known good source. It's interesting that Trent and Time has put in that there are some god-awful scripts out there. Yeah, you should know, Trent, mate. You should know.
He also says, good thing Guy Leech looks at my scripts. So
no, I mean, that's what I do with a lot of people. Is Trent's a good guy, and I'm really joking there. But it's I help people. So Carl Webster, for instance, I found a tweet yesterday he put out about me, just because I've helped to improve his PowerShell. But the stuff he was doing before, there was there wasn't a problem with it, because the most important thing with a PowerShell script is it sets out to solve the problem that you set out to do. And Carl scripts are great for doing that. Producing the documentation for all these things. They may not do them efficiently. They may have a few errors that we should hide. But that's the polishing stuff you can do later. As long as the script solves the problem, that is the most important thing. And people have said to me, Guy, can you have a look at this? It's not very good. I'm a bit embarrassed about it. It's like, no, it solves. If it solves your problem, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to sit here as I can call myself a professional PowerShell person because I get paid for it. But I'm never going to laugh at your code. I'm just going to say, well, yeah, you could do it this way. This way would be slightly better. Have you thought about doing it this way? Or I might go, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know you could do that.
Right.
And I've learned things from people.
And I think that's an important piece right there, is that with coding, scripting, whatever, there is typically no one way of doing something. And like you said, you may come up with a way that you didn't, that is just natural to you, but maybe someone else didn't think about it, or, whatever the case may be. As they say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I think coding, PowerShell shows that. There is typically not a single path you go down for perfect code. It is still an opinion more, what perfect coding is. As long as it's readable, other people could, follow up on it. If you leave a company or whatever, that's part of what you're aiming for, is to be able to, you're leaving that code, because eventually you will leave a company. You want the person that follows you to be able to take your stuff and progress it forward.
Yeah. And this is what I've said over the years, is that, the difference between just a coder and a developer. They're spelt differently for a reason, so you can differentiate them. A coder is just somebody who can put some code together, and that's it. Whether that be C++ or Python or whatever else. But a developer is the person who does the full life cycle. So they write the nice code that actually, maybe it's twice as long as somebody else's, but that's because there's a lot of comments in it. It's structured nicely so you can read it, which makes code reviews easier. There's lots of comments in it. With PowerShell, there's PowerShell help compatible blocks. So the last thing I do before I put a script on GitHub or give it to a customer is put all that help in. I find it very tedious because it's kind of like documentation, and none of us like documentation, do we? Well, except the documentation people. But it has to be done. And then, again, part of the developer role is, is writing the documentation outside of that, the user guides, and also writing the script. So that I was presenting this a couple of weeks ago. I'm due to do it again soon about writing robust code. Is, if you encounter an error, rather than just saying, oh, here's an error, go and do something about it. And in PowerShell, by default, will come out in red. And most people who aren't PowerShell experts, should we say, see a bit of red coming out of a script, and it's like, I'm going to run away. I don't know what's going on. Rather, why don't you just actually read the message? And as PowerShell developers, what we need to do is make sure when we output errors that it tells people what the actual problem is, and also what the solution is. This has failed. Oh, this might be because you need this patch, or why don't you go and look at this knowledge base article, or you haven't got this exact required permission. The more information you can give them to help them solve the problem, the better. As you said, sort of idiot proofing stuff as much as possible. I put a tweet out yesterday, parameters to scripts, error check them as much as possible. I got a reputation when I worked at AppSense. I was working in support as the bug whisperer. I could just whisper and then break a product. And people go, well, how are you breaking these products? Well, I'm trying to use them in a real life environment, as I'm in my laptop or wherever else, rather than a stage testing environment that you rip down and build up every week. But I'm also then trying to think, what if I didn't understand this? What if I didn't know the product was supposed to do this? What if I put this input in here or try and put this in? Oh, it's broken. Yeah. So it's just trying to second guess how people are going to use it, how stupid the users of the script are going to be. And of course, here I mean, admins and those sorts of people. But you're right. If you give somebody a script and hand over and do it well, either with a user interface on it, or even just if it, you don't have to do a fancy GUI, which again is fairly easy with PowerShell and Visual Studio and WPF. You can just write a text GUI, ask questions. What's the name of the server? What's the share? And then you check you can ping it. You check you can get to the share. All those things one at a time. It's just making sure that you write the code robust. I've been helping quite a few fellow CTPs with PowerShell, and a lot of the time it's a case of what happens if that fails? What happens if that fails? Well, that won't fail, will it? Well, at some point it probably will. Do you really want to carry on and possibly screw up thousands of machines or accounts or whatever else? Check for the error. If you don't know what to do, abort, but give as much information as you possibly can. Error codes, error returns are there for a reason. Check them, but don't as a user, don't run away just because there's a bit of red text and it's like, oh, it's broken. Phone home. Write as meaningful ones as you possibly can.
I think that starts from knowing why you're doing something. Like, just to bring that back, if you're not fully connected with, why you're doing a thing and the value of it, then it just becomes a kind of diminishing return, and it just gets worse and worse and worse the bigger it gets. If you're not documenting that well, if you're not giving the right kind of things to make it worthwhile, then it's really kind of not worth doing in
Absolutely.
an odd sort of way.
I guess I'm lucky and I very rarely have to write anything I don't really want to write.
Right.
So for ControlUp, for instance, that they take me on for two reasons. One, because of my 25 years of troubleshooting, and also because I can write PowerShell code. So if I do the perfect job for them, I do myself out of a job, because in case of Guy, what sort of problems do people get? This might happen, and then you check this and check that. Okay, and turn that into a script. So if I do my job right, the ControlUp tool will be able to replace me and all of us consultants, because all the knowledge and power will be in the tool itself.
I think Microsoft might say something about that. It's they don't want things to run perfectly smooth, right? That's no. But I think a great example is, and I'm going to ruin any chance I have with love with Microsoft, is Azure ARM error codes. For me, I do a lot of the WVD stuff, and sometimes I forget when I'm setting up an environment that you need to add your domain controller's DNS entry to the VNet. And the error code you get back when a computer will not join the domain is incredibly cryptic, right? I mean, it's like, one, you got to go through a ton of XML. They don't just come out and say, look, I couldn't find the domain controller. Just tell me that. That's all I need to know. It's like, that's the error you want to pop up, but they give you this whole thing. And then they say, now you can type this in, and with this yeah, I don't remember what it is, but you type in this code and and the troubleshooting thing will get back to you. And it's like, no, just put it in the output, when it fails, just tell me it can't find it or something, I mean, but it's incredibly cryptic stuff. And Microsoft, I mean, definitely not the only, company that does those things. But it's there could be a whole industry around just writing good errors, outputting good error messages.
We used to call that QA, but
but you know what? In not to insult developers, but they're the stereotypical developer doesn't want to have to hassle with that, right? I mean, hey, I know what it means. I know what it does. I'm the one that needs to know. Therefore, so it's a battle. And that's one thing I like, Guy, you've been on both sides of it. You've been frontline, you've been backline. And I think that's always kind of part of the problem is when you're a full-time developer that doesn't interact with what customers are actually doing with your product.
Absolutely.
It sets up battles that shouldn't need to be fought between the developers and support or whoever. It's it can be frustrating on both sides.
Have you seen that cartoon of the swing where it's different people's take on it? The project manager, the customer.
Yes.
Yeah, you see that all the time. When I worked at AppSense, I worked in various departments, worked in support, and you go and talk to the developers. Why have you taken this out? It's like, well, we didn't think people needed it. It's like, what? But you don't understand the software because they're very good at what they do, but they don't understand enterprise IT and the way people do it. There was one particular feature of one of the products. You couldn't configure permissions via AD groups. You could only do it via accounts, and they thought that was okay because nobody told them when you've got a 10,000 or 100,000 user enterprise, working with individual accounts just does not work, and people use AD groups. They did address those things later on by putting product managers and architects and those sorts of things in place. So that's that's a problem that's long gone. But it's very much the case. And even I forget who I was on the phone to today. They're saying, "Oh, just sorry, bear with me. My computer's not the usual. They're running slow, but I've got to do this on 4 different systems." And it's like, why 4 different systems? Why didn't somebody just spec up one system to do this? And it might be a case of money, but there's always that problem. And that's I suppose that's one of the beauties of being able to do it all yourself from soup to nuts is that I've got a problem. I'm going to write a script to do it, so I'm in control of the whole thing. But then I might give it to a customer and they say, "Oh, I can't run this; it's too hard. Can you make this bit or change this?" So even then, because I think, I know PowerShell, I do this, it's great. And then somebody who perhaps doesn't know PowerShell so well or doesn't even perhaps understand the problem it's trying to solve struggles with the script. I mean, I had this classic one at a customer a couple of years ago. Wrote a script for them to test some stuff, and they ran it okay. The replies from the guy sounded like he was pretty capable. So I made some changes to the script, added some new parameters, sent it to him, said, "Oh yeah, just specify this extra parameter for this." And he came back and said, "Oh, how do I pass parameters?" So what? You're running the last script okay. Then I realized the last script, the parameter was mandatory, which means if you don't specify it, then it'll prompt you for it. So this guy was right clicking in Explorer and doing run with PowerShell, and the original argument was mandatory, so it just prompted and he could type it in. The second one, because it was optional, didn't get prompted for. It's like, oh, you need to go to the PowerShell window. Oh, how do I do that? And then it all unravels that the guy who was kind of didn't reach out and say, "Look, I don't really understand how to do this," because probably felt embarrassed. Was actually said, "Look, help me," and that's what I do. And I help people. And those people who sneer down at people, say, "Oh, you can't run PowerShell." It just doesn't help at all. Doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, why why make fun of other people because they don't have a skill, or be proud of a skill you don't have? Like you said, there's people that say, I don't
Yeah,
script at all.
crazy.
Okay,
But not everybody is going to be a PowerShell expert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's not PowerShell and, something else, but yeah, yeah, crazy world. We're IT people are crazy people. That's all I got to say. We are all crazy to
I know
some
what you
extent.
mean.
Oh,
So
man.
I want to just because we're coming up to the top of the hour here, I want to talk about one thing. So Guy, you and I talked at Synergy 2 years ago, 1 year ago, something like
Last
that.
year, I think it was.
It
When
was
we were
last
both,
year, yeah.
I was certainly a fresh CTA back then.
Right, yeah, and that was something where you were um, just feeling like you were just getting involved in the community in general. So do you think you just didn't have any public involvement before that, or just what kind of
Yeah, I mean,
prompted that change in you?
we all have regrets, although there's no point dwelling on them because again, until I get this time machine perfected, it's not going to help. I said, one of my regrets was, it's not massive, was not taking PowerShell on until sort of 2014. My other one was not doing community stuff until the last couple of years. Seeing somebody like Brian Madden, who's been doing this stuff for many years, and Doug Brown. They were just doing this stuff back in certainly back in the 2000s, and I just kick myself now for not having done it back then, and shared my knowledge. A couple of times I thought about writing a book about perhaps troubleshooting, that sort of side of things, but whether can I blame lack of tooling like Twitter and the internet? I probably can't. It's just I didn't have that mindset to share stuff, and I do come across that. I'll go to a company and I'll find a good guy with PowerShell, and he'll say, "Well, I've written this script." It's like, "Yeah, that's really good," and it's not proprietary or anything. Why don't you share it with the community? It's like, "Oh, I don't know about that," and then you try and sort of coax them into doing that. So one of my regrets is probably overstating it, but disappointments with myself is that I didn't get started in the community until very recently. I was around. I've been, like I say, I've been doing Citrix stuff since '95. I tried to present at Bri Forum a few times, but I always got knocked back. But I've been presented at E2E now a few times, and those sorts of shows, and go down well. And I'm just kicking myself for not being involved, because I just love those events. I really am missing the face-to-face stuff. But even the E2E in Athens this month or next month, I won't be going to.
November. Yeah.
Health problems means until there's a vaccine or whatever, it's just not safe for me to travel. I really do miss those interactions. But I say to them, just get involved into community. It doesn't matter if you don't contribute much, but just being there and helping people. Everybody's got their own skills. Not everybody's going to be a PowerShell superscriptor or whatever else, but knowing who to reach out for, who to follow, whose stuff to look at. That's the key, really. That's where the power of community is amazing. I love the community, and it's just sometimes it's a bit onerous when you think, right, I've got to do this and do that, particularly for these awards, to make sure you get re-awarded. But again, that stuff will just happen almost naturally if you are that sort of person who likes to share, rather than, I've done this really clever bit, how can I monetize it? And I thought that at the start, when I was writing what I thought were clever PowerShell scripts, like, how can I sell this? How can I hide my intellectual property? And I thought, what's the point? It's not, even if I made a few hundred or a few £1,000, dollars, euros, whatever, it's not really life changing. Why don't I just give my stuff out there and just help people improve in general?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great story of, like, it's, there's no time. I mean, it's better late than never, I guess, is the accent there.
Story of my life, I think that is.
Yeah, right. I think a lot of us can say that. It's like, it's why if I put it off, then it's never going to be done. If you just keep what's inside, then the only one that is benefited is you. And so, my encouragement to, well, pretty much everybody out there is, it's okay to share. Don't rely on the fact that other people are saying the same thing to think that that's going to reach out to everyone. It's okay to contribute and share your your contributions or what you've learned. Just simply sharing what you've learned is a huge way to help other people learn. It's
Absolutely.
And your way of explaining it may be the key for someone else to understand it.
precisely,
So that's yeah.
precisely. Cool. Well, I
Yeah, and you
cannot
don't have to
believe.
be.
Good.
I mean, as we know, a lot of IT people are quite sort of inward, shy type people, like me, really. And don't want to go on wouldn't want to go on a show like this, or stand up at an event or anything like that. But there's plenty of ways of sharing your knowledge and information without face to face. You don't even need to show your face. You just have a website, put stuff on, or contribute to Twitter. Twitter for me is just a knowledge base of stuff that if I forget it, I can go and search. And if it helps other people, great. Oh, and the odd bad joke here and there as well. But you don't need and nobody needs to know anything about you for you to be able to post on Twitter. And then people will soon decide whether you're somebody worth following or whether you're not. I was looking at my follower account. Yeah, well, that's the one thing. Don't keep looking at your Twitter follow account because it will magically decrease if you watch it. Yeah, you need to look away. Just watch it out of the corner of your eye. But my Twitter followers has increased by not quite doubled, but similar to sort of this time last year. I'd like to think that's again down to the information I put out there.
I would like to say that Citrix finally followed me today.
Perhaps you owe them some money.
Yeah, I just found that amusing, but I was like, wait, what? But yeah, focusing on things like that, it really is a good way to make sure that you are not successful at that. Yeah, I agree. In fact, I really could not tell you. I should know these things. I really should. As far as my reach and things like that, I probably should. But yeah, it's easy to get focused on the wrong thing. If you just focus on your contributions, then that's really what matters. Not how they're being perceived necessarily or anything like that, but actually the process of doing it. So
I just like the occasional tweets I get saying, "Guy, this stuff's really great," or "Thank you, that's helped." Just those little things every now and again, rather than it's like shouting out to the world and you never hear back. Is like, well, is anybody actually listening? And how long have I been on Twitter now? Probably about 11 or 12 years. In the early days, a small number of followers put something out. Thought, wow, this is really interesting. This will get a lot of traction, and nobody's interested whatsoever.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're coming to the end of our time, so we're going to do a segment just for you, which is going to be final thought or favorite dad joke.
Final thought. Well, yeah, let me use time wisely rather than dad joke. Is with PowerShell, just try. Yeah, and if at first you don't succeed, look for good resources out there. Ask people. Ping me on Twitter, Guy, I'm struggling with this. Yeah, I'm not going to write your scripts for you, although I do offer that as a service, paid service. But if you're struggling for resources, the training courses, the books, etc., just reach out to the community. There's a lot of good PowerShell communities out there who have presentations. I presented with Gren, This Virtual World is Great to the Berlin PowerShell user group last week. I wouldn't have known me to do that in a non-COVID world, short of traveling over there. So just immerse yourself in all the resources available. User groups, Twitter, plenty of groups on, well, not to say Discord, but certainly on the web,
Slack and Discord,
forums, get scripts. There's so much content out there. You don't necessarily need to pay for it. I'm not talking about legal copies of books. I'm just talking about free resources out there. Yeah. And just stick at it. Sit in a PowerShell prompt rather than a CMD prompt. Don't use CMD. And just get used to it. Yeah.
And to make it even easier, Microsoft has made that command line. Those commands that you get at the command prompt, they work in the PowerShell prompt. So you can have a gradual learning curve in there. You don't necessarily have to jump cold and go, oh God, how do I pull up a directory or something? I don't know.
Yeah, PowerShell has a great number of built-in aliases to help Linux people. But again, PowerShell is available on Linux. But yeah, as you say, you type dir in, you don't have to know it's actually an alias to get -child item, which isn't going to come naturally to somebody who's just been doing CMD for 20 years.
Right.
Yep.
Just get used, but I think from something you said, it was a case of, if you only jump into it every now and again, that's going to make you much more difficult than if you're using it all day, every day. And I don't mean neglecting your day job and writing a script. I mean, if you're doing admin, even if it's just looking to see how many users are on or restarting a box, just do it in PowerShell. You get used to it. You get used to the tab completion, and because there's so much built-in help and I say tab complete for so many things, you don't have to know very much or remember very much. That's the key, and that helps me with my failing memory. Well, I think I've got a failing memory. I can't remember. So
I think
Microsoft.
Yeah, sorry, Guy. Go ahead.
I was going to say, just stick at it.
Yeah. I think Microsoft has
try again.
Yeah, Microsoft come out and said they develop for PowerShell first, GUI second. So it's, if you want to take full power of their products out of the box, PowerShell is the way to go. The GUI won't have everything in it for stuff. So typically.
But by the same token, be smart. Go out there, search. Has somebody else already done this? There's no point me in reinventing this wheel thing.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, somebody else has done it. But when you take that person's code, make sure you understand what it's going to do. Because if you're running it as domain admin in your 10,000 user domain, and there's something they didn't quite cater for, and suddenly you've wiped out all the users or disabled them all, or actually there was some malware in there and you didn't notice. Yeah, but it will save you writing that from scratch, and that'll help you. Just reading the code again just helps you understand. You look at something, and go, I don't understand what that does. Now, if you're really lucky, they may have put a comment in. Otherwise, reach out in the community. I'm looking at this script. Look at this. What does this do? Yeah, so don't be afraid to ask, but be realistic.
Test.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Guy, how can people reach out to you?
Easiest way, Twitter at Guy R. Leech, with the double E spelling of Leech rather than the EA.
Awesome. Well, Guy, thanks so much for being on with us today, and kick you back to our green room. And thanks again.
Guys. I've loved it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks all.
All right, Jeff.
All right.
Final thoughts or dad joke?
I didn't come prepared. I'm the one that did not prepare with a dad joke. I know we've kind of hammered this into the ground, but it's, I'm kind of dealing with this with my oldest, who just graduated, about finding a job. He's all, well, I don't want to start a job if I'm not going to like it, and I don't want to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but how are you going to know you don't like it if you don't try it? How are you going to know what job, what career you want to go into if you aren't trying stuff? Whether it's PowerShell, whether it's speaking, whether it's donating to the community, whatever it is, just give it a shot. It's not hard. And if it's something that you don't like or you don't feel comfortable with, at least you can say, I gave it a shot. One other thing I do want to add is that, if you do want to contribute, whether it's a blog, a video, whatever the case may be, you don't have to start up your own site. There are a lot of people out there that would be more than happy to post your blog and give you all the credit and everything else. You don't have to go through the whole thing just to, start contributing. That's how a lot of us started out, is just, Brian Madden, a great example. I used to post articles there all the time. So don't be afraid to reach out to anybody. No one's going to bite your hand.
And if they do, come on with us. And we've got we don't use it, but we've got a blog.
Well, and even then, if we have contacts, we can reach out for you if you'd like.
Exactly.
If you wanted it somewhere specific or something. Absolutely. Again, we, and I mean we, not just DJ and I, but we, the community, are always here to help people coming in. Absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. Good stuff.
Hey, everybody.
Cool. All right. Well, one thing before we go, I wanted to announce that we had this promotion going on with my new book, Just Do This, which is a book about IT services methodology. And it's not really technical as much as it is, okay, here's why you document and here's how to actually document, for example. So that's really exciting for me. So it's currently available on paperback and hardback. Oddly enough, I found this out the other day that actually my hardback edition went live way sooner than I thought, which is awesome. But I thought I'd give people an opportunity if you want to have a kind of a combo meal, then you can actually let's put these up on the screen here. There's a if I can get that. There we go. No, that's wrong. That I'm a professional, folks. So anyway, the idea here is that we have 3 books that are available. The paperback edition of Just Do This, the hardcover, sorry, I should say, the paperback of Be a Citrix Hero, which is my prior book, but also for anybody in the United States that orders this, I've actually got another book from a friend of mine named Dan Miller that I'm including as well. So if you have any questions about that, what these books are about, you can just go to thriveit.com/book bundle and find out more about that bundle there. So we appreciate your support. And honestly, I'm just really glad to see all of you out here. And we will talk to you all soon. Thank you so much for being with us for another THRIVEcast.